Imagine being a kid in 1982. You turn on your television and see something unlike anything that's ever existed before. A sleek black car racing down an open highway. A red scanner light moving across the front grille. Then you hear something impossible. The car talks. It doesn't just drive. It thinks, it analyzes, it helps solve crimes, and it has a personality. This was Knight Rider, the story of a man who was given a second chance in the incredible machine that became his partner. In the early 1980s, audiences were fascinated by the possibilities of technology. Computers were entering homes, video games were becoming a cultural phenomenon, science fiction was becoming more mainstream. The future suddenly felt closer than ever. But television had never seen a hero quite like this. Because in Knight Rider, the hero didn't just have a cool car. The car was part of the story. On September 26, 1982, viewers were introduced to Michael Knight and KITT, the Knight Industries 2000. Created by television producer Glenn Larson, the show combined action, adventure, technology, and a concept that sounded impossible. Man and a machine working together to fight injustice. Before he became Michael Knight, though, he was Michael Long, police officer whose life changed forever after a dangerous undercover assignment left him badly injured. Through the help of a secret organization called the Foundation for Law and Government, Michael was given a new identity and a new purpose. Michael Knight wasn't a superhero. He didn't have special powers, and he wasn't trying to become famous. He was simply a man who had been given another chance, and he chose to use that chance to help people who needed him. But while Michael Knight was the face of the show, there was no question who became the true star. KITT. The Knight Industries 2000 was unlike any vehicle audiences had ever seen. A car with advanced artificial intelligence, a car that could communicate, think for itself. For kids watching in the 1980s, KITT represented the ultimate fantasy. Not just owning a cool car, but having a partner waiting for you every time you stepped outside. And that was the magic of Knight Rider. It took a simple question: what if your car could think? And turned it into one of the most memorable television shows of the decade. But creating a futuristic car was only part of the challenge. The real secret to KITT's success was making audience believe that the machine inside that black Trans Am had a personality of its own. In the next part of this podcast, we'll look at the creation of KITT, the real car behind the legend, and how a Pontiac Trans Am became one of the biggest stars of 80s television. When Knight Rider first arrived on television, audiences were introduced to something they'd never seen before: a hero with an incredible mission and a machine unlike anything the world had imagined. But the real challenge was turning that idea into something audiences would believe, because a talking car could easily have become a joke. Instead, KITT became one of the most memorable characters in television history. In the world of Knight Rider, KITT was a technological masterpiece. Built by the fictional Knight Industries, KITT was designed to be the ultimate crime-fighting vehicle. It wasn't simply transportation. He was a mobile computer, a research tool, a communication system, and Michael Knight's most trusted partner. KITT's abilities seemed almost impossible in 1982. He could analyze information instantly, communicate with Michael, and monitor dangerous situations, and even make decisions independently. Remember, this was years before most people had personal computers in their homes, long before smartphones, long before voice assistants became part of our everyday life. To viewers in the early 1980s, KITT wasn't just advanced technology, it was the future. Of course, every television fantasy needs something audiences can see, and for KITT, that meant finding the perfect vehicle. The producers chose the third-generation Pontiac Trans Am as the foundation for the character. The Trans Am already had a futuristic design. Its low profile, sharp lines, and aggressive appearance made it look like it belonged in another decade. But turning a production car into KITT required a lot of imagination. The exterior was transformed with a deep black paint job. The interior was redesigned with a futuristic dashboard filled with lights and screens and controls. And then came the detail that would become instantly recognizable, that red scanner light. That simple moving light became one of the greatest visual trademarks of 80s television. Before KITT even spoke, audiences knew exactly what was coming, that the adventure was about to begin. But the thing that truly separated KITT from other fictional vehicles was not the technology, it was the personality. A car that could talk was an interesting idea, but a car with opinions, humor, and loyalty? That was something audiences connected with. The voice behind KITT belonged to actor William Daniels. Daniels made an unusual choice. Instead of making KITT sound robotic, he gave him a calm, intelligent voice. KITT sounded less like a machine and more like a trusted friend. KITT could offer advice, he could question Michael's choices, he could help solve problems, and occasionally he could remind Michael that maybe driving directly into danger was not the best plan, which, considering Michael Knight's career choice, is probably necessary. The relationship between Michael and KITT was the heart of Knight Rider. Their technology got people interested, but the partnership kept them watching. Michael wasn't simply controlling a machine, he was working with a partner. KITT trusted Michael's instincts, and Michael trusted KITT's abilities. Together, they created something television audiences had rarely seen before. And that partnership is what made KITT different from every other vehicle in pop culture. Batmobile was iconic, the General Lee was memorable, but KITT was unique because KITT talked back. For kids growing up in the 1980s, KITT represented the ultimate fantasy. Not just a fast car, not just a cool car, but a car with personality. It was the kind of idea that could keep a kid dreaming long after the episode ended. What if your own car could help you? What if it knew where you were going? What if it was your partner in every adventure? That imagination was a huge part of why Knight Rider became such a success. It wasn't just showing viewers a possible future, it was inviting them to dream about it. But while KITT was becoming a television icon, the man behind the wheel was becoming a star as well. By this point, audiences had fallen in love with KITT. The futuristic technology, that red scanner light, the idea of a car that could think and talk. But every great story needs more than a great invention. It needs a hero. And behind the wheel of KITT was a man who was given something most popular never get, second chance. When viewers first met Michael Knight, he isn't a wealthy celebrity, a larger-than-life superhero. He's Michael Long, an undercover police officer whose life changes forever during a dangerous investigation. After being seriously injured, Michael's given a new identity by the Foundation for Law and Government, an organization dedicated to fighting crimes that traditional law enforcement cannot. And from that moment forward, Michael Long becomes Michael Knight. But the transformation is about more than a new name. Michael Knight represents the idea of starting over, taking the experiences that shaped you and using them for something greater. He's not looking for fame. He's not trying to become a legend. He simply has a mission to help people who have nowhere else to turn. The man who brought Michael Knight to life was David Hasselhoff. At the time, Hasselhoff was still building his career, but Knight Rider would become the role that introduced him to millions of viewers every week. What made Michael Knight different from many television heroes of the era was his style. He was confident but approachable, capable but not invincible. He had the skills to handle danger, but he still felt like someone audiences could relate to. Michael wasn't the type of hero who walked into a situation looking for a fight. He arrived because someone needed help. Behind Michael's adventures was the Foundation for Law and Government, better known as FLAG. The organization provided Michael with the resources he needed to take on threats that were often bigger than any single person could handle. And of course, the greatest resource was KITT. Together, Michael and KITT traveled across the country, helping people caught in dangerous situations. Each week brought a new challenge, a new villain, a new mystery to solve. Part of the reason Knight Rider connected with audiences was because it perfectly captured the television style of the 1980s. Clear hero, dangerous problem, a memorable villain, and a thrilling solution. For viewers watching at home each week, every episode offered the same exciting promise. No matter how impossible the situation seemed, Michael Knight and KITT would find a way. Whether they were exposing criminals, protecting innocent people, or escaping impossible situations, the formula was simple: good versus evil, technology versus danger, and one incredible car that always seemed ready for the challenge. But the biggest reason people returned every week wasn't just the action, it was the relationship between Michael and KITT. Their conversations became one of the most unique parts of the series. KITT wasn't just a silent machine following commands. He had thoughts and opinions, and he wasn't afraid to share them. Michael might want to take a risk, and KITT would remind him that perhaps another approach might be better, which was probably a good thing, because Michael had a habit of finding trouble wherever he went. The friendship between a man and a machine was what gave Knight Rider its heart. The technology brought viewers in, but the partnership kept them invested each week. Of course, no discussion of Knight Rider would be complete without its unforgettable opening. The sweeping shots of the black Trans Am, the glowing red scanner, the dramatic narration, and one of the most recognizable electronic themes of the decade. Before the episode even began, viewers knew they were about to see something special. For kids growing up in the 80s, television wasn't just something you watched. It was something you looked forward to, a weekly adventure, a chance to step into a world where anything seemed possible. At its core, Knight Rider wasn't really about technology. It was about purpose. Michael Knight was someone who had lost his old life and found a new one. He was someone who used his second chance to make a difference. And that message connected with audiences, because behind the futuristic car and action scenes was a simpler idea. One person with the right tools and the right partner can make a difference. By the middle of the 1980s, Knight Rider had become more than a television series. KITT was a household name. Michael Knight was a television icon. Kids everywhere were dreaming about owning their own version of the future. By the time Knight Rider entered its second season, something had become very clear. This wasn't just another television show. KITT had become a pop culture phenomenon, and for kids growing up in the 80s, their favorite characters didn't stay on the screen. They came home with them. The biggest sign that a show had truly connected with audiences was when it moved beyond television, and Knight Rider became a part of everyday childhood. Toy stores were filled with versions of KITT. There were model cars, electronic toys, action figures, board games, collectibles that allowed fans to recreate Michael Knight's adventures at home. For many kids, owning a KITT toy was the closest they could get to the real thing. The dream wasn't just watching Michael drive down the highway. The dream was imagining that you had your own KITT waiting outside. And that was the magic of the character. KITT wasn't just a vehicle. It was a fantasy that kids could take with them. One of the biggest impacts of Knight Rider was what it did for the Pontiac Trans Am. Before the show, the Trans Am was already a performance car with a loyal following. But after millions of viewers saw that black car racing across their screens every week, it became something much bigger. It became KITT. The combination of the black paint, the futuristic styling, and that iconic scanner light transformed the Trans Am into one of the most recognizable vehicles in television history. For generations of fans, a black Trans Am wasn't just a car. It represented adventure and technology, and the possibility that something extraordinary could be waiting around the corner. Part of what made Knight Rider so memorable was that it perfectly captured the spirit of the decade. The 1980s were fascinated with bigger ideas, bigger technology, bigger entertainment, bigger personalities. Movies were introducing audiences to futuristic worlds. Video games were becoming a major part of childhood, and television was experimenting with new concepts that had never been seen before. Knight Rider fit perfectly into that moment. It combined the excitement of an action series with the imagination of science fiction. Another reason Knight Rider became such a hit was it was a show families could enjoy together. Kids loved KITT, they loved the action, they loved the excitement of each new mission. But underneath the technology and adventure was another message of helping people and standing up for what was right. Michael Knight was a hero who didn't just chase criminals. He helped people who needed someone in their corner. Like many successful shows, Knight Rider eventually reached the end of its original run. The series aired for 4 seasons, from 1982 to 1986. By the time the final episode aired, Michael Knight and KITT had already left their mark. The show had introduced audiences to one of television's most unique partnerships, man and a machine working together. But even after the series ended, the idea of Knight Rider never disappeared, because the best shows from our childhood simply don't end when the final episode airs. They become memories. Decades later, one image still instantly takes people back. A red scanner light moving across the front of the black Trans Am. It's amazing when you think about it. A show built around a talking car could have easily become a forgotten piece of 1980s television. But instead, KITT became something much bigger, a character, a dream, a symbol of a generation that believed the future could be incredible. But the story of Knight Rider didn't end when the original series ended. The fascination with Michael Knight and KITT continued for decades. Some television shows are remembered because of their stories, some are remembered for their characters, and some are remembered because they introduced an idea that felt impossible, until one day it didn't. Knight Rider belongs in that final category. At its core, Knight Rider was built around one fascinating question. What happens when technology becomes a partner? The idea of a talking, intelligent vehicle was pure science fiction when the series premiered. But the concept was easy to understand. Everyone knows what a car does. It takes you places, it gives you freedom, it represents independence. Knight Rider took that familiar idea and pushed it one step further. What if your car could understand you and help you and make decisions alongside you? Those ideas would eventually become part of real conversations about artificial intelligence, smart vehicles, and future of transportation. Television has introduced audiences to countless memorable vehicles. Cars that were fast, cars that were powerful, cars that helped heroes accomplish incredible things. But KITT was different. KITT wasn't memorable because he could drive fast or survive impossible situations. It was memorable because the audiences connected with him each week. The creators of Knight Rider understood something important. Technology is impressive. Personality is what keeps a relationship. KITT was a rare fictional invention that audiences didn't just want to own, they wanted to know. The influence of Knight Rider can still be seen through pop culture. The idea of a vehicle with artificial intelligence has appeared countless times in movies, television, and video games. Stories about smart machines, digital assistants, and human technology partnerships continue to explore the same question that Knight Rider introduced decades earlier. What happens when the tools we create begin to feel more like companions? Because of the popularity of the original series, the world of Knight Rider continued beyond the 1980s. Over the years, there were attempts to expand the franchise, including television, movies, and new series that introduced updated versions of the concept. But recreating the magic of the original proved difficult. Part of the challenge was that Knight Rider wasn't only a futuristic car, it was a combination of everything working together. Michael Knight, KITT, the music, the style, the technology, that sense of adventure. You couldn't simply build another talking car. You had to create that relationship that made people care. The reason Knight Rider continues to connect with audiences is surprisingly simple. It made technology feel human. In a world where machines are becoming more connected to our daily lives, the idea behind KITT feels more relevant than ever. Today we talk to digital assistants. We use vehicles with advanced safety features. We rely on technology to help us navigate the world. But the thing people remember most about KITT isn't the technology, it was that partnership. When Knight Rider premiered in 1982, nobody knew that a show about a talking car would become one of television's most recognizable pieces of the decade. An idea that the future wasn't something to wait for, it was something to imagine. Each week, Knight Rider gave audiences an adventure. It gave them a hero, and it gave them a machine that felt like a friend. Thanks for joining me today on another episode of Bite-Sized Nostalgia. If you enjoyed this journey through television history, follow Bite-Sized Nostalgia wherever you listen to your podcast. Share this episode with someone who still remembers the sound of that scanner light. Until next time, keep the memories alive.